ZimaBoard 2, huh? Electric Boogaloo from Icewhale. ZimaBoard 2. ZimaBoard was really popular with DIY people, the kind of folks that watch this show. It was a relatively anemic CPU, PCIe expandability, but it was cool as a building block to get your feet wet with building something custom, like maybe you're embarking on your home lab journey. It was a pretty compelling option. Well, this is actually the fourth product from Icewhale, and this one is based around the N150, a quad-core x86. This turbo is pretty fast, and I've got some thoughts. Let's unbox, take a look, and then dive in for some detail, talk about the software, setup, and some other things. Okay, so when you order this is what you get. This is actually ZimaBoard 2 with the extra $30-ish accessory package. And this one is the 16 gigabyte, 64 gigabyte version. I actually have the other version, but they sent me this one. So I don't know if they noticed I ordered one or not. I don't think so. So this is how it comes. Get this cool little like stretchy orange thing. And then you get the accessory box. And then if you order the optional thing, you also get this, which is a drive cage and a mini DP to HDMI adapter. Welcome to Zima Space, where the fourth dimension is actually not time. It is a third dimension with, I don't know. Okay, so spoiler alert, I've already kind of been through the motions with one of these, but it is actually pretty cool. Dual SATA, hack the rules, PCIe, 3.0 by 4 lanes, dual 2.5 gig Ethernet, 4K DisplayPort out, 4K 60 Hertz, this mini DisplayPort 1.4, and the quad core 3.6 gigahertz. So ZimaOS, Casa OS, we'll talk more about that. It's Debian. It's Debian with more steps. It's Debian. ZimaOS, Casa OS. ZimaOS is the Icewhale sort of taking over what was Casa OS, so we'll come back to that. You can run Windows, Linux, OpenWRT, Proxmox, TrueNAS, all that works on here. This can also be a box for you, like an actual accessory box. So it's like, oh, look at that. Dear friend, I'm Lauren, founder of Icewhale Tech. Hello, Lauren. How are you doing? Good products, good ideas. Fun stuff. So the top... Oops. The top of this is meant to hold this. This is basically an aluminum brick. Aluminium for those of you across the pond. So on this end, you have a proprietary power connector and 2 normal SATA power connectors. On this side, you have a little tiny connector for connecting the optional cooling fan. This is your PCIe 3.0 by 4. It is an open-ended slot, so you could use a longer card here. However, power delivery, we'll talk more about that in a minute. So I wouldn't recommend this for cards that push the 25 watt power limit on a slot like this, and a mini GPU, you can forget it, because those demand up to 75 watts. You're not going to get 75 watts out of it. It's just not, forget it. You're barely going to get 25 watts, and not in every scenario. And we'll talk more about that. 2 USB 3.1 ports, which were not on the box as a feature, but they're actually really fast. This thing is surprisingly not bandwidth limited in testing. It's very surprising. Okay, so this thing, you can do like this kind of a number, and then that, and then you can actually mount some drives here, and then you have a mini 2.5-inch SSD NAS. Like, that's basically it. In the accessory box, you get the power brick, which I think this is 60 watts. Okay, so they've bumped the power on this a couple of times, 60 watts. And this is something to pay attention to, because the N150, strictly speaking, is like a 6 to 8 watt TDP, but it's Intel TDP, so they just kind of make things up. Really, this thing can draw 20 watts of power. So that's 20 watts of your 60 watt power budget. The power connector for your SATA drives, if you're going to use mechanical SSDs, and we're going to use some 27 terabyte drives from serverpartdeals.com in just a minute that I actually bought and paid for. This is not a sponsored spot or anything. It's just fun stuff. Those can use like 10 watts under extreme load. So like 10, 12 watts. And then if you have 20 or 25 watts for your expansion card, you're over the power budget, or you're flirting dangerously close to the maximum this little thing can output. And as we'll see, but 60 watts, I think like if I were building this product, 60 watts is the wattage of power adapter that I would choose to include, but I would also give you a disclaimer that says, hey, if you're going to use a 25 watt PCIe card plus high current draw mechanical hard drives, and you're going to run this thing at full tilt, and you've got the little accessory fan that you're going to bolt on it, you're going to be right up against the power limit for this, and probably what the PCB itself is designed to deal with. So maybe consider that, take that into account while you're doing things. There are other mechanical hard drives that don't use, north of 10 watts under, full load type situations. So if you're using M.2 or dual M.2 adapter, you're also going to be under that 25 watt limitation. It's going to be more on the order of like 20 watts, worst case scenario, real world, probably like 16, 18 watts. And again, well under. And keep in mind that in normal scenarios, that N150 really is going to be more like 10 watts. So you do have a little bit of wiggle room here. It's just that 60 watts in a worst case scenario for all of the peripherals, as we'll see in a second, can be a little problematic. But otherwise, it's basically fine. This is the funky adapter cable. So this is all molded into one. This is designed to plug directly into SATA drives, and it is blocked. You can't use this with SAS. So like if you had a fancy SAS adapter that was PCIe and you were plugging this into SAS, you were trying to do SAS signaling, these connectors physically will not work for SAS. The other disappointing thing about that is that there's no way to power. So like if I added, well, we'll talk about that in a second. This only works for the intended use case of SATA, either SATA SSDs, which is the best case scenario. SATA SSDs aren't going to use a ton of power, or SATA mechanical hard drives, which works really well with this thing, which we'll look at in a second. This fan, you almost don't need this fan. This fan is a little bit of cooling on this aluminum heatsink. The only time I've been able to get this thing to overheat is running the CPU plus a GPU. The N150 GPU can encode and decode and deal with Plex and Jellyfin and all that. Shows up because the ZimaOS, Casa OS is kind of like a fancy interface for Docker, and you can just pass the DRI device. We'll talk more about that in the software section. You can get to a scenario where, even with passive cooling, after about an hour and a half, 2 hours, this thing is uncomfortable to touch. It's like 60 to 70 degrees C external temperature and like 87, 88, 90 C on the N150. However, if you run this tiny little fan with it, that's all it takes. It will never overheat under any scenario, which is impressive because this is an inaudible, tiny, tiny, tiny fan. So that's why they bundle it, I think. It comes with screwdrivers for disassembly because it's, I think, M3, like M2, M3, Starhead. The screws are a little unforgiving. I wouldn't recommend disassembly. And it also comes with a bunch of international heads for your power brick. So I will use the US power brick. Now, internally, this thing has 16 gigabytes of memory and a 64 gig eMMC. The other configuration is 8 gigs and 32 MMC. That is the one that I played with the most because I was curious. I think after having played with it, I would really recommend the 16 gig version, unless you're just getting this as a media server. The other use case that is incredible for this is if you have a pair of 27 terabyte hard drives and you want to give your friend an offsite backup that's a replica of your most important stuff, about $300 plus the cost of drives, you can have this little box sitting silently somewhere in their house or their apartment, and it can receive, 27 to 50 terabytes, depending on how much risk you want to run, of your offsite backup data via Tailscale. Effortlessly, silently, your friend doesn't have to worry about it, doesn't have to poke holes in the firewall, doesn't have to do anything. And that is an excellent use case for this type of thing. But we'll talk more about that. Now, I have some SATA SSDs that we're going to test in a minute, but the mechanical hard drive thing is really cool. So this is the Shanghai Icewell Technology product 2-bay HDD rack. It's not just an HDD rack, as it turns out. This one was a little banged up in shipping. I'm hoping it's okay. If not, I'll run grab the other one. But it's all the screws and mounting accessories. Yeah, it doesn't seem too banged up. It comes with this, but it also comes with your PCI Express by 4 extension cable. So this is kind of cool. It'll sit like that on your desk. You put drives in it, and it plugs into that, and that's it. You're done. We'll just use that for garbage since the box is ruined anyway. Now, to mount this, you would normally take out these 4 screws and use the longer screws to mount the ZimaBoard directly to the drive enclosure, which is then also still used as like a heatsink on the heatsink because it's just metal on metal. When you're doing the assembly of this thing, uses the mounting screws for the hard drives, like reuses them. So you want to, yeah, the first thing you would do is mount this thing. I'm not going to do that because this is only a temporary configuration, but this would mount to this with those longer screws. So it's fine. Could put the drives in like that. And we're going to screw in the side that has the PCI Express connector because the cable wraps around the drives. So you end up with something like this. It's a little weird because you've got the connections on the front, but you've also got the connections at the rear for the drives, and the connection for the PCIe card is going to be there. So it's pretty neat cabling wise, you got to admit. To install the fan, you will have to take the bottom off. And there's a pretty cool little red light on the side. Now, what about the power limits? Something that I thought would be a really awesome use case is this. This is a SAS 1.2 gigabytes per second per channel. It's 8 channels. This card uses 25 watts of power, and it will run on a ZimaBoard, but it's when that's running full tilt and 2 mechanical hard drives are running full tilt and you're running something on the CPU and the GPU, you're a little over power. And what happens in that scenario? Well, I had the ZimaBoard lock up on me once, but mostly nothing bad happened. Our kilowatt here showed that I was actually drawing like 61, 62 watts from the wall. I think this is a little bit of a contrived scenario, but if you were using a high wattage network card or something here, it might be a little problematic. This is something that I would use if I were getting some enterprise cast-off SAS flash drives, which is basically impossible. Like at the beginning of 2025, you know, $50 a terabyte and under, like $20, $25 a terabyte if you were lucky. Those days are over, at least for now. But this could run 2 or 4 SAS flash drives, and those generally are under, 20 watts per drive. And so that can run from this kind of a setup. But the cabling here also becomes problematic. The cabling here is only designed to work with SATA drives. So you'd have to build a custom power adapter to go from the power output here to that. And I think this power connector here is not really designed to deliver more than about 20, 25 watts on the 12 volt rail. So if you wanted to run 2 SAS flash drives and the rating for those drives was under 20 watts, you'd probably be pretty safe. That plus this plus everything else, you're flirting with that 60 watt power limit. But I think in 9 out of 10 scenarios, you're going to be fine. But if you have a weird problem, that is the thing you should look at and try to figure it out. And to be sure, any other N50 or N150 based solution that you were doing this kind of mad science, it's not going to work at all. It's not going to work. If you look at the B-Link, like B-Link had that cute little 12 gigs of memory with like 4 M.2, 4 one-lane M.2. That thing didn't deliver enough power unless you were using the very, very low power, like creator friendly, like the T-Create ones that are PCIe Gen 3. If you use any kind of modern M.2 with that setup, the thing was immediately overpowered. So not a great solution. Whereas this thing, 60 watts. Zima has tried to give you some margin there to be able to deal with that. So that it worked as well as it did and was almost flawless, is very impressive. So they sort of know that their audience is going to be a little bit creative DIY, I think. So not really a complaint. Not a complaint at all, actually. More of a praise. As it might sound a little backhanded. I did have the one lockup. That might have also been because I was running without the fan and it was, super hot. But mostly it was fine. And really, I should be complimentary of that. They did a good job. This is probably the most robust N150 solution out there, which is saying kind of a lot. Now, the ZimaBoard does have an EFI. Although, curiously, I couldn't get to the EFI with the bundled mini DP to HDMI adapter. But it does have an EFI, and this is the EFI. It's sort of a bog standard, no frills, but also nothing really locked down. You got a lot of options. The built-in NICs, in case you were wondering, were Intel i226V. It does support wake up at a specific time. The BIOS is pre-configured to turn the system on when it loses power. You definitely do not want to change that because then you'll have a hard time turning it on because it doesn't have a power button. It comes by default with resize bar disabled. The GTT size is 8 meg and the aperture size is 256 megs. Again, I think these are all reasonable defaults for this platform. The platform itself does support SATA hot plug. However, curiously, that is disabled by default in the BIOS, so don't hot plug. Something different in late 2025 when the ZimaBoard 2 is launching than when the ZimaBoard originally launched is that a lot of vendors have noticed that people are really interested in mini NAS, portable NAS, like things that kind of fit into this device category. So if you're going to take the ZimaBoard and build a mini NAS, you may be able to find a better deal on a ready-to-go N150 based NAS. Or if you're willing to just deal with a mini PC because you don't want to use mechanical storage or whatever else, you may be able to find an even better deal. And if you scroll through Amazon and look for things that are N150, sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, the ZimaBoard is clearly a better deal, but other times it's impressive what you're able to find for under $200, especially if you're going to DIY something to a 3D printed case. You have a lot of options. There is a particular kind of itch that the ZimaBoard 2 can scratch. Just be aware that there's a lot of other options out there if you're going to do comparison shopping. And if you have questions or you're going to embark on a specific project, that's what the Level 1 forums are for. There's all kinds of people there that are exactly where you are or where you were, and they have a lot of the same kind of questions. You can find a lot of information there and play pros and cons, what if, 20 questions. That's what forums are for. That's what community is for. Behold, welcome to Debian. I mean ZimaBoard 2. ZimaBoard 2. Ooh, accept privacy policy. Normally, I'll just be honest with you. I'd probably format here like Proxmox TrueNAS. It's like, So the good news here is that ZimaOS is not new and it's not half-baked. And, the Ice Whale, the people that are doing ZimaBoard have been doing this a while, and they are very closely monitoring community feedback, and they're doing things in the open on GitHub, and they're doing things right, as far as I can tell. So in terms of community support and that sort of thing, it's really nice. PeerDrop, if you're not familiar with it, is like AirDrop, but it's also compatible with Android, and so you can use this for moving files around. There's also ZVM, which will let you install virtual machines. Now keep in mind, you've only got 4 cores here. This is not going to set the world on fire. But this is a platform that you could run several Docker containers, Jellyfin, Plex, whatever. You also do have full access to hardware acceleration. This is an Intel-based graphics solution, which is exceptionally well supported in both, Plex Media Server, Jellyfin, which I would encourage over Plex, and pretty much all of the media solutions out there. And the kernel and operating system image that underlies the ZimaOS has been updated to support that. And the way that ZimaOS supports that is it's basically a GUI for Docker. So if you follow this channel and you follow other stuff that we've done before, we usually walk you through Docker. We famously had the forbidden Docker installation on TrueNAS, and then it took them a couple of years, but they came around and were like, our overly elaborate Kubernetes setup is probably not what people want. Maybe we should go with a Docker and Portainer. Who could have predicted that? Anyway, I'm just giving you a hard time. They've, Zima has done the reasonable thing, and it's just a light GUI on Docker. I probably would have not bothered trying to make it simpler and just gone with here is Portainer. This is Portainer. But they've done a pretty good job with this. We're going to go to the App Store. Look at that. You can just point, click, and install Plex. Again, these are all pretty much pre-configured Docker. Boom. Tailscale's installed. Now I can do stuff. Oh, I forgot. We got to configure storage and backup. There's actually, they make a Windows Zima client, which you can install on Windows or Linux or whatever. And they know about 321 backup and all this kind of stuff. And again, if you don't want to do any, I just want Proxmox works fine in this. TrueNAS works fine in this. It's x86. You've got a lot of options. We're going to go to settings, store, and we're going to create storage. And it's like, use RAID to combine multiple disks. Yep. Or you can do a single disk. We're going to do combine. RAID 1. We're going to do RAID 1. Now, interestingly, it does support RAID 5, but it requires a minimum of 3 disks. So that whole like SAS controller thing, like if I add a SAS controller, I'm going to probably be over my power limit and blah, 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 but then it'll work. And yeah, story for another day. There's our two 27 terabyte hard drives. Thanks, serverpartdeals.com. There goes the data. Now that process automatically created an SMB share or Samba share, so it should be visible on Windows and Mac OS. Boom, there it is on Windows. Now here I have a Cache OS Linux ISO. Let's see how quickly I can copy it over the network. It's not impressive. We'll fix that in a minute because it's probably doing the initial synchronization. The network interface is capable of moving 250 megabytes per second, which is our full 2.5 gigabit. Oh, it only linked up at 2.5 gig. That might be part of the problem. 1 second, I'll be right back. Okay, we'll come back to that in just a second. It's working, but the GUI is not updating. Now, if you're in this channel, you're probably wondering, okay, it's Debian, how do I enable SSH? Developer mode, general developer mode, go to view. Let's turn on SSH access. Probably also worth turning on HTTPS, because any password or anything you type into this connection, it is not secure. There's also this button that'll give you the web-based terminal. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so it is up to 2.5 gigabit. In the advanced settings, you can also configure where it stores app data and your Docker stuff. The app image thing is maybe worth moving to mechanical storage or whatever you add in. In this case, this ZimaBoard is 64 gigs. If you get the 32 gig version, I would definitely recommend moving that to your internal storage. It's eMMC. eMMC is not known for absurdly high endurance, and it's soldered, just like the memory. The memory is soldered. You're not going to be able to upgrade or to change it after the fact. So, user database, moving that, like all of this stuff not being on the eMMC is just going to increase the longevity of the platform. It might make it a little slower because it's a mechanical hard drive, but longevity. This is also where you go for updates. So this one, the other one is already updated to 1.5.2. This one is needing its 1.5.2 update, but it's not really that far out of date. It's 1.5.0 is what I have here, so it's just some minor bug fixes in this particular version. You can also set the disks to standby to go to sleep after they've been idle for like an hour or two, and that'll lower your power usage even more. When this thing is idle, it is only using about 6 watts before you add disks, like 5 watts, 6 watts. You can go a little lower, but mostly that's just down to the network card and the CPU. That's 5-6 watts is on the low end of what you would get from any NAS, so it's pretty good. All right, what about under the hood? Under the hood, like, okay, what is the RAID? It's Linux MD RAID. So cat proc MD stat, this thing is going to be resyncing for 1773 minutes. It's a lot of minutes, and that's before we can do a proper, proper benchmark, proper test to see how this is going. What file system did it use? BTRFS. So we can see that our safe storage here is BTRFS. It's not using BTRFS RAID 1, it's using Linux MD with BTRFS. Now, I would probably add logic here to the ZimaOS operating system to say that if you're doing RAID 1 or RAID 10, just do that natively in BTRFS. It's fine, it's safe. If you're doing RAID 5, RAID 5 is still a bit sus with BTRFS. And I would probably trust Linux MD RAID 5 or RAID 6. And then put BTRFS on top of that. That's what a lot of other NAS solutions do, and that's fine. The N150 does actually have enough horsepower, especially the 16 gig version, to run ZFS. And in case you're curious about the output of LSPCI, there's LSPCI so that you know what you're working with. Now I mentioned ZFS replication. ZFS replication is maybe a little better served with a different distro, but I learned that ZimaOS has actually laid the groundwork for doing ZFS replication. you want to use something like Sanoid and Syncoid that run on top of ZFS. In a nutshell, how this works is you have your ZFS dataset somewhere else, and you create snapshots, and then you can push those snapshots, which is an automatic differential change, to a remote system, like something based on ZimaOS here. If you're using Tailscale and there's a direct Tailscale connection from the machine that hosts the dataset that you want to back up, and your ZimaBoard 2 is on your tailnet, then it can connect directly, and Sanoid and Syncoid can just run over SSH. Now SSH is usually, like, there's a fair bit of overhead with SSH, and you can do direct LAN connections, like you could do an M-buffer connection over your telnet, which is a little outside the scope of this video, but I was delighted to learn that you don't actually have to change the operating system. If you want to use ZimaOS to do this, you can. The GUI that they have for this just uses Linux MD, and so if you're just going through the GUI here, it doesn't work. But you can go to, what is it, General and Developer, and turn on SSH and SSHN, or use the web terminal. I wouldn't recommend the web terminal because the web terminal is not secure. And you really should turn on HTTPS, but look at that. ZFS is actually loaded out of the box on ZimaBoard 2. Okay, because there's no GUI for this, we're going to do it manually. You can just follow the commands on how to. You can create a stripe or a mirror. If the stripe is any one of your hard drives dies, you're going to lose everything. But maybe for an offsite backup, you don't care if you lose a mechanical hard drive because you can just spin up another one of these and keep going. 27 terabytes versus 50 terabytes, it is tempting. It's like, oh, look, there's 50 terabytes. And it's just a backup. It's just a replica. It'll be fine. It'd be fun to build a 3-drive version of this. Ironically, the chipset actually does support 3 SATA connections from what I can tell. It's just not exposed on the platform. So understand also the implications of some of this. And I'm also going to disable sync. Because I don't really care if some data is lost in flight. So, tank. There we go. And now the zpool is created. And from here, we just have to install Sanoid and Syncoid. Beware also that the GUI for ZimaOS doesn't really seem to understand that you created this. Now, in my mount command, I created a custom mount point, so it will show up in files. Like if you go to learn more in files, I called it tank. It's just in files there. You could mount it under media and star it, but you know, ZimaOS HD is technically that built-in eMMC, so it's not quite the same. It's not like as it would have been with Linux MD. I looked at what it would take to modify the GUI to do this, and it seems like most of the functionality is there, but that's maybe a fun exercise we can do on the Level 1 forums. But just know that, you know, like the Files app will work correctly, but this storage thing, it's only showing us, it's like, oh, you only have 47 gigabytes, and, you know, it doesn't really show correctly. It's just, From here, you will need to, this is just the ZFS part of it, you still have to deal with the sync part of it, and you're going to have to deal with that on SSH. And your zpool status, like I did the mirror, so if I lose one of my disks, how do you know? Well, the GUI's not going to alert you. You'll have to run zpool status every now and then, or you'll have to plumb in some email alerts for yourself, which is a little bit of a DIY exercise. From here, if you need help setting up Tailscale, replication, SSH access, enabling package management, Git is installed so you can do like Git stuff to clone repositories and that sort of stuff. You're gonna have to come to the forum because we've got a bit off script here. But I was happy to see that ZFS is supported. But also bear in mind that like we've gone so far off the reservation here, it might be better to use a different distribution because this is x86 after all. So maybe a Linux distro that's more purpose built for this would be a little bit better fit. Now the ZimaOS is a little unusual. It's based on Debian, but apt isn't here. It's really meant to be an appliance OS. I found some discussion of this on the ZimaBoard forum. Nevertheless, it is possible to set up Sanoid and Syncoid on ZimaBoard 2. Now, strictly speaking, you don't need to, because it's going to be, like for our stated use case of like it's going to be a backup appliance, it's going to be on the receiving end. All you need to do is turn on SSH and configure SSH keys so the remote system can SSH into your ZimaBoard without a password, and that's part of the how-to. But it is possible to set up Sanoid and Syncoid. It's just there's a couple things I would tell you to do with that, and that's in the how-to. One of them is the data partition, because it's partially read-only because it's an appliance, but /data bin is already in the path, and so you can just git clone Sanoid and Syncoid because they're just scripts, and set them up and configure them and configure cron, and basically it's okay. But really, you're better off just enabling SSH access and setting up Sanoid, Syncoid on the system you're going to, the source system that you're going to push from, and that's a better, cleaner solution. But you know, again, I'm already running a little long here. Check out the forum, check out the how-to there. Know that it is a thing that's possible. And with Tailscale, you know, you don't even have to use SSH. You could use something like mbuffer, which has less overhead, and I've written guides and how-tos on that in the past, and that would all apply here. There's nothing ZimaBoard specific about that, because again, it's x86. Just be aware that you have options and there's cool stuff you can do. That's pretty much it for a crash course for ZimaOS. It's not bad, it's competent, doesn't have any weird backdoors that I've noticed, but you can run your own operating system on here. This is just an x86 mini PC, a very slightly different flavor, so you can do whatever you want. But I do like that ZimaOS is doing everything out in the open here on GitHub, and you can build your own version. And if this is something you want to experiment with, you actually can. You can download CasaOS or ZimaOS and run it on arbitrary x86 hardware. So if you'd like to just take it for a spin and try it and see how it works, you can do that on garbage tier hardware. It doesn't have to be an N150. It can be an older x86 platform. It can be literally anything, because it's just Debian under the hood. So don't be afraid to experiment. If you have experiences, good or bad, with ZimaOS or CasaOS that you want to share, that'd probably be a worthwhile contribution in Level 1 forums. I'd love to see it. I can live vicariously and learn from your mistakes or your horrible experiences or your good experiences. Let me know. All right, so bottom line, it's a competent little device. If I really hold my mouth right, I could achieve 1 GB per second from this platform by using an add-in 10 gigabit card. That was in a Quantia NIC because it's relatively low power. That works. The dual 2.5 gig, you can't aggregate them. You can use SMB multi-channel. That will work at 5 gigabit. You just have to drop to the SSH terminal and configure that. The off-label uses work fairly well. I did encounter several PCIe devices that the system just wouldn't initialize or use for whatever reason. Maybe too much power. It seems to know it's in a limited power constraint scenario, so it doesn't always enable the card. Sometimes it tries when it shouldn't. Some of those SAS controllers, the older, like SAS 600 older generation, can work a little better than the newer stuff because of the power requirements, but again, a little bit of an off-label use. Network cards and M.2 cards worked fine, so Zima actually has one that's one NVMe M.2 plus one SATA M.2 that you can connect, and that would be okay. So, bearing in mind these limitations in the configuration of this platform and full UEFI, it can be a compelling option. When Zima first started, there was not a lot of options. Now it's a whole universe of options. But this is pretty cool to see community support and stuff on GitHub and that sort of thing. I don't think it's priced high, but I also don't think it's priced low either. It's not the deal of the century. It's somewhere in the middle. It's probably priced about where it should be. And also, I bet that the cost of memory has gone up significantly, and that factors in just a little bit. So, I don't know. If you end up using one of these for a project or something, let me know. I want to see it. Hit me up in the forum. I'm Wendell. I'm signing out, and I'll see you there.